move this up. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, I'm going to talk close. So thank you so much. So our presentation is called A Feminist HCI Approach to Designing Postpartum Technologies, and the subtitle is from one of our participants who said, when I first saw a breast pump, I was wondering if it was a joke. So I'm Catherine D'Ignazio. I'm an assistant professor at Emerson College and a research affiliate at the MIT Media Lab.
I'm Becky Michelson. I'm a project manager at the Engagement Lab at Emerson College, working on games for social change and civic media and technology research.
So in fall 2014, I appreciate the lead up from the prior presenter, we staged a large hackathon at the MIT Media Lab. And the hackathon was called the Make the Breast Pump Not Suck hackathon, which was pretty specific and very descriptive of what we tried to do. So in this paper specifically for CHI, we're presenting an analysis of 1,136 crowdsourced ideas to improve the breast pump that were submitted by mothers prior to staging this hackathon event. And just a quick note that we're using the term mother very expansively in this paper to denote all female and gender variant parents. So what is a breast pump? This may seem like a super basic question, but I actually didn't find out about what these things are until I was 30 years old and 8 months pregnant. So I'm guessing that some people don't know what they are. This is what it looks like. This is kind of one of the kind of medium models on the market. Breast milk and breastfeeding are acknowledged in public health to be the superior way to feed your baby. The American Association of Pediatricians recommends 1 year of breastfeeding. The WHO recommends 2 years of breastfeeding. And this is a machine that ostensibly is made for helping you to sustain or support that breastfeeding relationship. So what it does is it helps you extract milk from your breasts when the mother or the trans dad is separated from their baby, or when they want to extract milk and to then save it for later for feeding their baby at a later time. So the way that it works is that you take this machine somewhere. You typically have to plug it in. Hopefully you go somewhere private because you have to basically like half disrobe. You have to take off your clothes. You take those bottles and those cone-shaped things and you hold them to your breasts. You turn on a motor, if you can figure out how to hold them to your breasts and also have a hand to operate the motor. And then the motor works, it creates a vacuum and literally sucks the milk out of your breasts, and then later it collects it in those bottles and you store and fridge it somewhere for your baby. So it's sort of like the speculum. If you think that's not very advanced, it's really not. So it's been about the same since like 1854 when the first one was patented. This is one for like a consumer grade one from 1914. So what do you think mothers think about the breast pump? Just a couple quotes from some of our people who submitted things to us. I love breastfeeding my 8-month-old, but hate pumping. I cried the first time I pumped at the hospital because of early latch issues, and I struggle still to do it every day. Pumping is so isolating. It sucks to have to leave friends and family or have to go home in the middle of a party to go pump. I cried the first time I used my breast pump because it was so belittling and noisy and cow-like. Like probably all mothers, I was very understanding of the benefits of pumping, but I hated every minute of doing it. So for a little bit of background, one of the main points that we make pretty continuously throughout the paper is that the breast pump is a kind of socio-technical design object. And it sits at the intersection of a lot of really complicated systems, including public health policy, insurance regulations, workplace benefits, workplace environments and spaces, lactation education, leave policy at these many multiple levels, local, state, federal, family history, and individual experience. So this is a really complex ecosystem. It's complicated for mothers to navigate. It's complicated for researchers to navigate. And so to help navigate that, we are drawing on 3 frameworks in the paper. So we draw on Feminist HCI as defined by Xiaowen Bartzel, which we also had an introduction to earlier today in the first presentation. In particular, we focus in the paper on the feminist qualities of interaction design that include ecology, advocacy, participation, and pluralism. And then we're also drawing from human-centered design approaches. So the idea that technology should be developed around the actual practices and lived experiences of users and not the other way around. And then finally, there's an emerging body of literature in HCI that we reference on crowdsourcing for product ideas, advocacy, and research. And there's an emerging conversation around motherhood in HCI. It's still somewhat under-researched and under-innovated in pretty much every field, but there is an emerging conversation that has started in recent years. So the way this worked in terms of methods, the way we went about it was originally, this was not originally a research project. It was the hackathon. We were staging a hackathon. And we wanted to try to stage a human-centered hackathon to make the breast pump not suck. And to do that, we felt like it was very important to represent the voices of the people who were actually using this device. And so we published a call for ideas publicly on our website and at the bottom of blog posts that we wrote about it. And to our surprise, this went viral on the internet via social media and mainstream news. We thought we would get maybe like 100 ideas for people at the hackathon to consider. It resulted in over 1,000 ideas. And the ideas were were incredibly varied. We had said, just send us your ideas for how to make it not suck. And we got things very short, so like things like this that were just an email that would say, Moore's Law for breast pumps. Each year, breast pumps should be smaller, lighter, and more effective. To the thing on the right, which I apologize you can't read, but it's really, really long. And so we would get these very long personal stories that explained the whole context of like how people were using the breast pump, what their ideas were for changing it. We even got a 10-page Google document with diagrams inserted into it. So this gives you a sense of like how deeply and passionately people were kind of responding to this. And so the hackathon is the subject of another research paper, which is here, called Towards a Feminist Hackathon, that we published in the Journal of Peer Production just recently. And so we're not going to go too much into how we designed the hackathon, but this is how the ideas were displayed at the hackathon. So I felt like this was sort of important to mention, is that we got all of those ideas, and then we printed them out large on cards. We hung them up on the wall at the hackathon. As people came into the hackathon, we had them color code them based on different themes, and then we also tied the judging of the hackathon to how much people had considered the ideas contributed by the mothers. And so now I'll turn it over to Becky to talk a little bit about our methods and some of our findings.
So as Catherine mentioned, over 1,100 ideas poured in before, during, and after the hackathon. And after uncovering the top 10 negative sentiments expressed, the data was analyzed with a grounded theory approach in which the research team regrouped after analyzing the interviews to produce a code book with over 30 different codes and themes. And while many of the stories had specific design recommendations for the design of the pump, many of the stories also expressed deeply personal experiences with postpartum care. The multitudes of stories that expressed internalized feelings of shame, isolation, and inadequacy drive us to consider the socio-political context in which these postpartum technologies are used. And throughout the stories, different use cases emerged, ranging from going back to work to special circumstances that made it difficult to use the standardized pumps. In the workplace, there are many aspects to adjust to while pumping, and common issues that come up for many women are needing a silent space, such as during conference calls, needing sanitary places, many people resorting to using storage rooms or crowded bathrooms. And in some workforces, such as in the Army or medical settings, it makes it difficult to take regular breaks in private to pump, and so mobility is very important in those situations. And in other professions where travel might be important, there were difficulties with using converters to charge the devices. And many women also expressed managing discretion, such as by disguising breast milk in company fridges and experiencing stigma with that. Pumping at home, other needs arise, such as multitasking, caring for multiple kids, also needing mobility in that. And both with pumping in the NICU and exclusive pumping, where there might be a need to produce more breast milk, there are needs to track the milk that's produced, and having comfortable devices to encourage the relaxation that is needed to pump and produce a great volume of milk. So to read more of the stories, moms who pump exclusively have a need to pump everywhere, not just on their couch. Hands-free and mobile, untethered, are a must. Many of us also pump in the car. It's the best use of our commute time. So some of the themes that emerged in the code book are around mobility, comfort, easy cleaning, and discretion. As mentioned, pumps are often bulky, they need to be plugged into the wall, thus limiting mobility. The materials themselves are often cold and firm. Many of the parts are not even dishwasher safe oftentimes, and with discretion as a big motivation for a better design, we could think about how workplaces can encourage more lactation rooms, and in public spaces, some places have legislation to include more pumping pods and things like airports. So it's good to consider. Could some sort of a self-cleaning mechanism be added? I have the privacy of a storage closet for pumping, but then I need to roam the halls with my breast pump gear to get to the teacher's lounge and clean it. The bathroom just seems so unsanitary. And of course, then I always hope there are no male coworkers in the room, as they tend to turn a little red in the face at any sign of pumping gear. Some of these are secondary themes that emerged, such as being able to integrate with a smartphone to track output of milk, and shareable pumps as well, since there are oftentimes a need for sterilization, which makes it difficult to share these really often expensive devices. Make pumps where moms can pass them on to friends. Not everyone can afford them, and every mom should have access. Customizable suck pattern. I can customize the vibrate on my phone, but I can't customize how my pump pumps. What's that about? So I'll turn it over to Catherine.
So one of the things that taking a human-centered design approach to this space yielded is a way of navigating the complexity of these things and gathering insight into the system from the perspective of the people as they are kind of going through it and making decisions along the way about, which pump, how do I work, how do I care for my child, and so on. We got a lot of stories that alluded to aspects that related to parts of this socio-technical ecosystem apart from just simply the pump specifically. So things like this. In the U.S. alone, breast pumping at work is still very much an unknown phenomenon. I've had male coworkers at progressive high-tech firms completely oblivious to what this is and not understand why I cannot just reschedule it to attend another meeting. And so this relates back to the feminist HCI qualities of ecology and participation. So using this kind of crowdsourcing, listening methodology became a way of navigating that ecology and getting a sense of the kind of way that different things fit together. In the paper, we also offer some reflections on ethical crowdsourcing as part of the design process. So one thing to note is that analyzing the data is very resource intensive. Doing a qualitative analysis of over 1,000 separate pieces, sometimes of very long text, is resource intensive in an unexpected way. We also think crowdsourcing can work for marginalized users, such as these users, if they're digitally connected. And so that was a facet of this group. We would recommend that the prompt in these kind of situations be generative and creative and empowering rather than kind of telling you to repeat something about the status quo, whether you like or dislike something as it currently exists. And then finally, we would advocate for having a really clear purpose and articulate that to your community for what they get out of participating, not just like it's research, but for us, this was connecting the ideas and voices about improving the breast pump to the designers, engineers, and pump manufacturers at the hackathon. And this also leads us into the discussion about the feminist HCI quality of advocacy, which implies a kind of proactive ethics on the part of the designer to not simply design for the status quo, but to change it. One of the most prevalent themes from the ideas, as I think you can see, is the sheer negativity and actual trauma of the experience of using the breast pump. Mothers feel ashamed and humiliated at an act that is one of the most dignified and admirable things to do, which is to nourish and sustain another human life. And I think this mother really put it really well when she said, ultimately, no pumping technology can overcome the fact that our society pushes women back to work too early, with loads of supply-dropping stress about how costly childcare is. And until we fix that on the policy front, no pump is going to meaningfully change the landscape of what nursing mothers are up against. So if there's one finding from our paper that is informing our next steps for this project, this is it. The overwhelming feelings of shame, guilt, humiliation, and anxiety can be interpreted as individual women internalizing the failures of society. So if breastfeeding is a public health issue, which we are told that it is, it's a collective issue, then the ability for women and families to make breastfeeding work is also a public issue and a collective responsibility. So recently we've been thinking about interactive technologies that might be able to redirect these feelings of individual failure, inadequacy, and trauma away from the individual body and towards the collective body. So in short, to design for advocacy. And so I've been told that I don't have much more time, so I'm going to sort of call it there, but we have continued, we have been doing advocacy through a Facebook community, and we have a lot of reflections on what advocacy and developing technologies for this kind of advocacy might mean in this context. So I will leave it there. And I guess the one really important thing to mention is that, how can we keep reconceiving of the problem space as we learn about these ecologies? I think, are we solving the right problem is the question to keep asking ourselves. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the talk. Madeline?
Hi, I love this paper. I think you're raising some really important points. I'm really curious about the hack, and I know that that's not part of the paper, but I wondered if you could just speak to how you're using what happened at that hack to make change in industry. Is that something that you can do through hacks? And if you can, how do you do it?
So the way that we organized the hackathon is we invited as many of the pump manufacturers as we could get a hold of to the table. So we had representatives from Medela, who's kind of the biggest operator in this space there, Lansino, there was one other one, and then there was a company that made accessories called Simple Wishes that made like hands-free bras and stuff like that. And so they were there, and they were actually, like Medela actually sponsored one of the prizes of the hackathon, and they also sent one of the members of their user experience team. And I think it was very productive in the sense that they were very open to participating. The folks that they sent were very sympathetic to all of these concerns. I think there's a partnership that is ripe for making there. And that's sort of how we felt we were doing. Like we were taking some of these voices and some of this information. That was partially also our reason for putting it on GitHub in an open source way, is so that it then can be picked up in an industry that is pretty closed in terms of how it innovates and what kind of research that it does, that it could be used and those voices could go on and be listened to in the process of designing the pumps. And so I think that's actually a productive avenue and way of changing the space. And that's kind of what, I didn't really talk about this, but one of the things here was, can the design process be a public conversation about the future? And so, think about if we could stage these conversations more publicly in the way that the hackathon did, where we bring different stakeholders to the table, that's maybe a way to open up that space, but also give those manufacturers things they're going to bring back internally to transform the technology. Yeah. So, thanks.
Any other questions? Oh, one more.
I really like this talk. Other than challenges with plugs and connectors, did you see other cross-cultural or other cultural challenges with breastfeeding and pumping? For example, my wife and I brought our 15-month to UbiComp last year, which was in Japan. And so we had all sorts of interesting challenges about breastfeeding on a 4-hour train ride in another country. And there's all sorts of really interesting challenges that occur kind of when you've got these cross-cultural trips and cross-cultural experiences. Did you see anything like that come out in your research?
Yeah, so I mean, the paper and the context of this is very much U.S.-centric. And when we talk about policy in a paper, we're talking specifically about the U.S. I think there's huge cross-cultural issues. I mean, the way that issues like breastfeeding in public vary from country to country are very different. In some countries, I mean, I'm thinking of like Scandinavian countries, it's sort of commonly very accepted. Here we have this kind of fraught relationship with it. Japan, I know, is very modest. And so all of these issues come up. Also, even just the issues, there's so much in terms of cultural norms. You know, you saw the quote from the woman in the workplace where like the red-faced coworkers, like even just seeing breast milk makes them feel very uncomfortable. Like it makes everybody very uncomfortable. And so that's like this whole other area of sort of thinking about how do we change that. But actually I think that like staging these large-scale public conversations is a way, and even just more research and more talk about in the space is a way to start to normalize those things, legitimize them, and have it be something that we can see breast milk and not be, you know, ashamed of it. I mean, it's just such a weird thing that it's like it's a life-giving force, and yet we're like, ew, it's like poop or something. You know?
This is awesome work. I really like it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a great talk. It's 3:50, so we should head out for a break. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.